Hey everyone, welcome back to another Covalence demo. Today we're going to be focusing on centering elements, primarily vertically, but also horizontal centering as well, right? So we want to get something, an element inside of a parent element perfectly centered. Horizontal centering is always easy. It can be done literally with one line of CSS, but vertically centering something used to be more difficult than it is now. Today we have a little cheat code called Flexbox. We're going to end with Flexbox, but we're going to go over some other options first in terms of being able to actually vertically center these items. So please sit back, relax, subscribe if you haven't already, and enjoy. All right, let's get at it. All right, so we're going to start out creating an HTML file, and we're going to link a CSS file. So let's go ahead and stub this out, and we are going to create a styles.css, and we're going to link it. So link style sheet styles.css, and let's go ahead and just call this centering, and we're going to keep it simple. So let's just create a container div inside our body, and then that's going to basically be our area that we're going to center an item in, right? And so let's call this container, and then we're going to have our div.centered there, and inside of our center div we'll just say hello. Alright, so let's do our container and our centered. Our container, let's just say that we'll keep its width 100%, and we'll say that its height is 50 ems, and background color, let's do something that we can see but isn't super dark. Well, let's see. Let's do chocolate. Chocolate sounds nice. And then centered, let's say we want the background color of this to be white, and the text will be black. And for now, what we can do is we'll just align the text in the center. So text align center. And for now, we're just going to have this div in there. We're going to pop it open real quick, see what it looks like. And as you know, it's going to be at the top here. The div's containing hello. The hello is centered. And it looks like, yeah, the body itself, the body has a little bit of margin on it. That's actually just basic or default browser settings. There's actually a little bit of a margin everywhere. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to say body, margin 0, padding 0. All right, then we'll reload that. All right, so now it makes a little bit more sense. It looked like there was extra padding in this div. But this white background div, it's a little confusing. This is actually a white background overlaying this chocolate rectangle here. So what we want to do is we actually want to get this text centered in the center, right? We just want a box with hello in it, centered in the center. And so the way that we can do that, this centered, we don't want it to be, we can either give it a width with block alignment, we can make it inline block. There's a bunch of different ways we can do it. We can make it inline, and that would center it horizontally, but vertically it's going to be difficult to center an inline element. So vertical centering by default is difficult. That's why we use Flexbox a lot of the time, and we'll get into Flexbox as an option a little bit later. But for now, we are going to just work on different ways to vertically center something, because obviously if we wanted to horizontally center it, we could make it inline and then horizontally center the item, right? So just to kind of show you how that would work real quick, if we open this up, we're not even going to change the code real quick. We're just going to go in here. We're going to say display inline. All right, and then what we could do is the container right here would actually have text align center. All right, and then so that's what it is. We can see that the background itself doesn't have any padding. Inline elements by default are like that, and so if you wanted to give it some padding around this, we could, but again, it's not really meant to have padding itself. So what you could do is change the display to inline block, and then you can see that the padding actually wraps around all the way around, right? So that is something to note, that inline block and inline do behave differently, but the inline block will allow padding to work a little bit better, and it still centers it exactly like inline would, right? So the parent having text center centers it as well. So again, we can't get this vertically aligned, so what can we do really, right? One of the most basic things we can do is we could actually take this container class and we could add padding top to it, right? So we know that this is 50 M's, so roughly if we did padding top of 20 M's, and then obviously we'd have to do box sizing as well, right? So it's not quite, we could raise it a little bit more. You could calculate it out, that this height itself, we could actually give this a height if we wanted to, so we could actually calculate this out to be perfectly vertically centered, and the padding itself kind of gives you a pretty good estimate of getting this thing in the center, right? So we use text align to center it horizontally, and then we did vertical alignment using padding in the parent element here, right? And so that did a pretty good job, and honestly for a lot of cases this is a good option. I know it seems kind of just I don't know, a little bit of, it's like half effort, but actually using padding to vertically center items is considered good practice. Now if you don't, especially if you know the width and height of this thing, right? Or if you know that it's not going to end up overflowing or spilling or being some long short story here, you can actually just use padding to push things down and have a best effort fit for centering an item. Now, if you want to get a little bit more programmatic about it and make this thing a little bit better, what you could actually do is you could actually have a set height and set width on this this element here, or the centered element itself, right? And we could absolutely position this thing with relatively positioning this container. So let's go ahead, and so we've seen the padding as an idea, but let's go ahead and make this position relative. And for centered, we're going to make it position absolute. And what we're going to do is absolute positioning, it automatically makes divs kind of behave more like an inline element, or more like an inline block element in and of itself. So the width actually only contains the width of the content, and so does the height as well. So what we can do is we can give this a little bit of padding, just make it look a little bit better. So padding, let's say 1M. All right, and right now by default it's just falling in line with where it would flow into the page regularly. So it's the only element in the container, centered is the only element in the container element, and so it just by default becomes inset 0, which is top 0 left 0. And so if we wanted to, we could say left 50%, top 50%, right? That seems like half and half, right? Now the problem with this is that it's not actually centered. It looks like it might be, but it's not, right? So actually this point right here, this upper left point, is perfectly in the center. It is exactly 50% down the page and 50% from the left, but then the element expands out from there, right? And so this is not perfectly centered, and if we shrank this down, we would be able to probably see this. So let's just say height, let's go to 20 M's. Let's even shrink it more. So let's go down, and as you can see, as it gets smaller, it becomes more apparent, right? So 9 M's, you can see that it's no longer vertically centered, and actually if we were to give it a width as well, all right, we can actually start to see as we shrink this, it is not horizontally centered either, right? So it's neither vertically nor horizontally centered. How can we do that though? How can we make this thing exactly in the center? So let's go ahead, reload this page real quick, and the way that we can actually do it is if we know the width and the height of this box element, we can actually use margin, which is weird, but it works with absolutely positioned elements inside relatively positioned elements. And so let's go ahead and we're gonna just find the right height and width for this thing real quick. So let's just say height 2ems and width 4ems, and we are going to give it box sizing. All right, so we do need a little bit more height here. Let's see, 3ems looks pretty good. All right, and then the padding itself becomes more or less negligible, so we can remove this padding. Oh, no, we want the padding to vertically center the hello. All right, so we'll leave the padding in there. Padding 1em, width, height, and let's make it so that the padding actually makes sense. So width, let's just say 4.5, and that looks pretty good. So height 3ems, width 4.5ems, box sizing, border box. All right, so let's remember that. Height 3ems, width 4.5ems, and box sizing, border box. Right now, I have another video about box sizing and what that does, but basically the border box is saying that the width and the height take into account the padding and the border, right? So that's what you saw there with that change. Now, this hasn't accomplished much, but instead of left 50% and top 50%, what we're going to actually do is we're going to say left 0, and then we're going to say right 0, we're going to say top 0, and bottom 0. Now, because this thing has a width and a height, it's actually going to be trying to stretch the element, except there's a height and a width, right? A set height and a width. Now, what this means is that if we say margin auto, it's actually going to push it perfectly in the center because it's going to actually apply equal margins on the left and the right, and as well as the top and the bottom. So if we now refresh this, this looks like it's in the center, and if we take the height of the container and we drop it down, we can see that it always stays directly in the center, vertically aligned, right? If we give it a width, whoop, 40 ems is what I meant, and then we drop this down, it stays perfectly in the center, right? So very cool way to horizontally and vertically center a element like that. And we can tell that it's, you know, this is an actual block element, it's an actual block element that, you know, has an actual background color associated with it, all right? It's not, you know, see-through. It's a white element over top of this chocolate element, and it's perfectly in the center, right? But we did have to know the height and the width of it. Now, what happens, let's go ahead and refresh this. What happens if we don't really know exactly, you know, how high this thing is going to be? We don't know how tall it's going to be. So let's just say, let's increase the width a little bit. Let's say, now again, if we do change this width and this height, right, let's just say 5ems and 10ems, right, this box is still perfectly in the center. The hello is not in the center anymore, but this surrounding box, the container element, is perfectly in the center, right? So again, if we go ahead and we, you know, have something like this, and then let's just say, you know, we have some hello text in here, and let's go ahead and just get some lorem ipsum real quick. So lorem ipsum. Let's see, sure, generate this, and we're going to go ahead and just grab some text in here, and this is a lot of text, so let's just say, you know, we'll end it maybe there. Let's see what this looks like. All right, obviously not what we want here, so let's go ahead and let's do it even more. Let's add about this much, and we are going to remove the height, and we're going to change the width to be 15ems. All right, let's see. So now we have the top and the bottom, right? So it's stretching it to be the entire height of this thing. So we have no height anymore, so we need to remove this top and bottom, but you can actually see that the left and the right still worked because the width was still set, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to remove that. So again, this was here. I left this here by mistake. It got overwritten when we did the left and the right there. So let's remove that as well. I'm going to refresh. All right, so the left and the right is actually still centering, but the top and the bottom no longer knows what to do, right? So even if you had top 0, bottom 0, right, now it's actually expanding the element to be the entire height of the thing, because it doesn't know the height. Even, you know, if you said height auto, whoops, right, it's the same exact thing. Now if we said height 20 ems, all right, now it's going to center it like before, but that's not what we want. What we want to do is we want to still center this thing, but we're not going to do top 0, bottom 0 anymore. We're actually going to do top 50%. And just to do everything exactly the same, we could still say this. If we didn't know the width of this thing, then, you know, we could actually remove this as well. But again, let's just say, you know, let's do that. For consistency's sake, let's remove the width as well. And we're going to make it display inline block. And we're not going to have as much text in here. Let's just say what we want to do is we want to create a multi-line text. So we're going to put a little line break in here. And it's just going to be lorem ipsum line break, and then we're going to do, let's see, the second word here, and then sure, 3 lines, a couple words. We don't know the height, we don't know the width, all right, but we still have left 0, right 0, so it is actually pulling it the whole width of the container. So let's remove left 0, right 0. All right, so now we have an inline block element with padding. We don't know the width or the height of this inline block element. It's completely based off of the content inside, right? Now we have top 50%, that's why it's pushed down half the page. We got to remove the margin. But what we can say is top 0 or top 50%, left 50%. And now we're back to this original issue where if we actually shrank the container itself, right, we can tell that it's actually not in the center of the page. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to use a transform. So we're going to actually translate this element. And the cool thing about translation is that it's based off of the width and the height of the element itself, right? And since translation is done at a certain point in the render cycle, it can actually calculate it out based off of its content width and content height. So we're going to use a transform itself. Now I'm not going to actually prefix any of these. There's too many things like with auto prefixer, things like that are available. So I'm going to just use translate 3D. I know Chrome will work with transform. It doesn't need WebKit transform or obviously not MOTS transform, but I would suggest always doing transforms with prefixes just to make sure that it's going to work in maybe some older browsers if people are using it, at least for now. But what we want to do is translate 3D takes 3 arguments. It takes an X argument, a Y argument, and a Z argument. And what we're going to say is negative 50%, negative 50%, and 0. Now what we're saying is that we want to translate this thing negative 50% of its width in the horizontal x-axis. We also want to translate it negative 50% in the y-axis and 0 in the z-axis. So now, if we reload this page, we can see it did shift up and to the left. And if we were to pull this height down, it is dead center all the way. If we were to give it a width, it is dead center all the way. All right. It actually shrinks even, which is nice. And yeah, so that is actually vertically centering it without knowing the height and the width of the container, which is a very good thing to be able to do. Now, the final thing that we could do is we could actually use Flexbox. Now, Flexbox, historically, I've never liked Flexbox, but I've also been doing HTML and CSS for way too long, and I just have PTSD from the old days where Flexbox just did not work well, and it was inconsistent across browsers, and was such a pain to get to work on everything. But nowadays, Flexbox is pretty dang good, and it works very well. A lot of CSS frameworks themselves, even Bootstrap included, are based on Flexbox entirely, and so it's probably good enough to be able to just use now. And what you can do is you can actually just, instead of obviously this container itself, it doesn't even need to be position relative. You can say display flex, and the centered item itself is going to be the item that it's going to be aligning. We're not going to need any of these things anymore, so we don't need the top, the left anymore. We don't need it to be position absolute. But let's go ahead and we're going to load this real quick. So the flex item itself will actually pull it to be the height of the container. So let's see, inline block, text align center. So technically, if you wanted it to not, obviously flex the entire height of the box, you would actually state that. But again, let's pull up the code. Let's see, you could say inline flex. Oh, no, that made this element inline. So we want it to be flex because display flex actually displays as a block style element, but the item itself will actually expand the whole height of the Flexbox container, right? So if we want to say align items center and justify content center, we would do so. And what this does is it now no longer spans it to be the entire height of the element, but justify content is going to push it into the center. So real quick, if we just align item center, this is going to, make sure you save it. All right, that's going to vertically align it. And then if we just had justify content center, that would be the horizontal alignment. Now, the align items works twofold because it actually just makes the element itself the height of the content, and it aligns it vertically, right? And so that align items works twofold. Otherwise, the default value of the Flexbox would be to make it the entire height of the element. And so there you go. That is the final way to center item. This is probably the one you're going to run into most these days as Flexbox becomes more and more popular. And again, if there's any other ways or any other ideas that you guys have in terms of more ways to horizontally and center items, please feel free to share in the comments and we can make an additional video about it. All right, see you later. All right, so hope you all enjoyed that. Hope you learned a little something. I know that position absolute, margin auto, left, right, top, bottom, 0 thing, I learned way too late in my career. It could have definitely helped me and saved me early on. And so obviously there's probably other ways to vertically and horizontally center items. If you have any tips and tricks or have any preferred ways or favorite ways of doing that, feel free to share them in the comments and we can obviously make another video and maybe even feature you as well. So definitely subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and reach out to us if you have any other content or video ideas, and we will definitely make them. So all right, hope you all enjoyed, and until next time.